Nukdeh! Greetings to all starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is Engaging with Picard. I am your co-host, Josh Pritchett, and I am joined today, as always, with my favorite partner in crime.
Oh, I'm your favorite partner in crime? You love me. You really do love me. Hi. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Guten Morgen. Buenos dias a todos los amables oyentes. I am Chris Pabon, the co-host of Engaging with Picard, and apparently there's at least one person in this entire quadrant who loves me. Thank you.
Yeah, I do what I can. So, Chris, we had some Galaxy class starship size revelations this weekend, did we not?
We did, Josh, but first I got to tell you about something that happened to me this morning.
Ooh.
I was on the path of the prophets, which I also call the path through the park near me, and I was buzzed yet again by another cyclist. They're supposed to tell you when they're about to pass you by with like their horn or yell out left. That's enough. Today, I take his head.
I don't blame you. I was at an intersection and a bike whizzed out right out in front of me right when I had the green light. So you know, it's you know, this is getting out of hand, people. I mean, but
There
we,
are
we
no
we we like everybody who takes bikes, but please, you know, any rate,
there are no bike paths for those who do not yell out to people on the path in Stovercore. I'm just saying.
this is very true. There is no path to Stovacor for inconsiderate bikers. So at any rate, so I think we should go ahead and dive right in with the highlights of this week's episode. This is for everyone who's keeping track at home. Episode 303 of Picard, 17 seconds. So, okay, the episode opens with a flashback to the week that Riker and Troy's first child is born. Of course, remember, this is Nathan Riker. And according to the episode in first season, um, Nathan Riker did not survive because he had some sort of ailment that could have only been cured if somehow it had something to do with if they could have used a positronic brain, which was unavailable because of the ban on AIs. So this scene is Riker and Picard sitting in a bar celebrating the birth of Riker's son. Um, Riker hopes that wishes Picard that he would someday experience what he's feeling, and Picard just kind of shrugs it off. It's like, nah, I kind of gave up on that a long time ago. And then Troy, and the first time we've seen her this season, calls in on a hologram and demands that Riker come home because she's been up for 72 hours and tells him to bring the bottle of whiskey they're sharing. Then the scene cuts back to the bridge of the Titan A. They are still being pursued by the Shriek as they go further and further into the nebula. And at one point, they do manage to leave them. To lose them. And Chris, you want to pick it up there?
So they managed to die. They've taken a lot of hits. They're deep within the nebula, but the biggest hits are yet to come because Picard and Riker go down to sickbay where Beverly is with Jack, and the confrontation that we know is coming has arrived, and it is a fantastic tour de force by two actors. Riker and Jack leave both Beverly and Picard by themselves, and it is just a maelstrom of anger, regret, what might have been. I mean, it is a fantastic tour de force by two really great actors, and that scene alone catapults this to what I believe to be the best episode of the series. And there's sort of a resolution. Meanwhile, outside, Riker and Jack have an opportunity to talk, and you know Riker tells him at one point at the end, well, you can call me Captain. Um, and those words are somewhat prophetic because um, while the sensors are down, they are doing the equivalent of looking outside the back window to spot the Shriek, and it is spotted, and the Shriek attacks them again, and this ends up in Captain Shaw, which I think most of us expected, being incapacitated. But before he's taken away to sick bay, like he looks at Riker and says, like, you're responsible for this, and you're going to get us out. And he transfers command of the ship to Riker, and then is taken off to the bridge. And so now we have the Titan in the hands of an experienced captain. Even though we still don't have Seven, Seven is still confined to quarters. And at this point, Riker and Picard manage to shake the Shriek because, and you see how the both of them are like of one mind. That they fire a photon torpedo. They know it's not going to penetrate the hull of the Shriek or their shields, but then they fire a phaser to detonate it, and the shockwave is something that the shields of the Shriek cannot stop, and so the shockwave pushes them to the side and allows them to escape, even though they're still left with the conundrum of how the heck are they still tracking them, because sensors are supposed to be useless inside this, what may or may not be a nebula. And at this point, the action shifts to Tamalas Prime. And Josh, I know you're probably chomping at the bit to talk about this part, so go for it.
Oh, yeah. So, Rafi, still recovering from the events of last episode, wakes up and sees the video of the Starfleet Recruitment Center being destroyed again. And she's still wondering what's going on. She doesn't know who rescued her. So she picks up her hand phaser, walks in. There's Worf practicing for the All Valley Finals in case Cobra Kai wants to show up. Sorry, mixing my metaphors here. And tries to sneak upon him. And that's always such a great idea, isn't it? To sneak up on a Klingon, especially when he's practicing with a sword. So after Worf promptly disarms her, she demands to know who he is. And Worf proceeds to tell her, I am Worf, son of Moog, scourge of the Doros family, house of Martok, slayer of Galron, son of Sergei, house of Rashinko. I have made chamomile tea. Do you take sugar? So after that, he proceeds to explain to her that he has been trying. He is also. She asks him, "Is he with Starfleet?" And he just says, "Our interests align," which means, Worf, have you been out of Starfleet for a while? What's going on? So he then proceeds to explain that he knows that it was not the Romulan not the Romulan dissident that had bought the weapons and used them to attack Starfleet, but he has tracked to a human who is on the same planet they're on at the moment, and they need to capture him and question him. So even though Worf does kind of want Rafi to go away and kind of get better, she says, no, I got to see this through. So he's like, okay. So they go looking for this human, and Worf makes a comment about how she's standing out because she's wearing this hooded cloak, and she's like, oh, you mean, you look so normal, you look like you're ready to go to Tuesday beheadings. And they sight the human. Rafi gives chase, but Worf intercepts him. And in a tribute to WWE Hall of Famer The Undertaker, Worf chokeslams the guy straight to Grey Thor, looks at Rafi and says, beheadings are on Wednesdays. After which they then take the human back to the ship, to the Sarah. And Chris, you want to tell us what's going on the Titan at this moment?
So on the Titan, Captain Shaw is aboard. He's in sickbay, and Beverly's helping out because they're totally overwhelmed. And at first, the doctor there doesn't really want her help, but he's called away to engineering. And so the captain is there, and Beverly managed some old school medicine to basically save Shaw's life. And Shaw grabs Jack, who's helping out, and says, how are they still finding us? And he sees the blood on the floor, and like there's an epiphany. Meanwhile, they finally have warp capability back on the ship, And Riker's like, let's get the heck out of here. And they exit the nebula, and he says, send out an SOS and let's go to warp. But the Shriek is right behind them, and the Shriek activates the unknown energy weapon that was in the bay, which generates a gigantic portal, which, as they try to go to warp and exit, it ends up, the portal up in front of the ship and deposits them back inside the nebula with the Shriek. And so they don't know what's going on, and they try it again, and again they activate the weapon, creates the portal, and deposits them back inside the nebula with the Shriek. So Riker's like, well, we just got to dive back in there. And so they dive back into hiding. Meanwhile, Jack comes looking for Seven, who's confined to quarters. And it turns out that she has what looks like a metal replica, tiny little one, of the original Voyager on her shelf. And so Jack says, you are a Fenris Ranger. It's the whole thing of blood in the water, when you can put some blood in the water to help track someone. Like, how are they tracking us? Like, you're a Fenris Ranger. Tell me, how could they be doing this? And she mentions, well, it could be deuterium gas. Maybe somehow we're leaking that. And he says, yes, let's go find out. And meanwhile, Riker sort of forgotten to rescind the order that she be only in quarters, and Jack rescinded himself by knocking out the guard at the door. So then they go to a section of engineering, and they find out that, yeah, they are indeed leaking deuterium gas. And so they also discover it's sabotage, because whoever started the leak used not only disabled the computer so they could detect it on the bridge, but they also used a phaser to create the leak in the first place. And so deuterium gas is very deadly, so they have gas masks on. And so Seven says, stay here, I'm going to go check out this other place where it might be leaking. And Jack is there, and like the system is getting ready to vent the gas. And then this guy that we've kind of seen in the background, throughout the episodes in the Titan, he appears again, and he attacks Jack, and he yanks off his gas mask. And notably, the man himself does not have a gas mask on. And so Jack, who already knocked out one Starfleet officer and has a mean left hook, like hits him again, and his face kind of shifts. More on that later. And he knocks Jack out, and he leaves him in there to die. Meanwhile, Picard and Riker are having a discussion about whether they should fight or flee. And because Seven has already alerted them that they have a leak, and that's how they're being followed. And Riker's like, okay, you know what? As soon as we plug the leak, we're out of here. And Picard is like, no. As soon as we plug the leak, we fake leaving, come back around, and we attack. And Riker's like, and yes, I understand tactically that makes sense, but I've got to worry about the 500 people in the ship. We're getting the heck out of here. And then the scene shifts back to La Serena. Joss?
Yes, so Worf and Raffi have got their prisoner restrained, and Raffi, they're playing a version of good cop, bad cop, with Raffi being the bad cop, Worf being quite restrained. And Raffi is hinting at all kinds of mean, nasty things they're going to do to this guy. And he is, the human is sweating, he's shaking, and Worf tries to be the calm one and tries to, say, hey, look, I used to be like her, angry, impetuous. Just tell us what we want to know. We don't want to hurt you, come on. And Raffi tries taunting him because she thinks he's an addict. So she has the vial of the eye gas thing, and she starts waving it, and he's not responding. And then Worf has a thought. He looks at him and says, how long have you been holding this shape? And how long have you been away from the Great Link? And it's like, oh my Kalis! It's a changeling! The changeling poses as a human, shifts back to his original gelatinous form. Worf disintegrates it. And then Worf tells Raffi that for some time he has known that there has been a dissident group of changelings that left the Dominion and have infiltrated the Alpha Quadrant, and that he was told by a friend about this. And that they are the ones who stole the weapon. But they also find out something else. They not only stole experimental weapons, which evidently the Shriek is using at this moment, they stole something even bigger. Now, we don't know what it is yet, but it is something from at the Daystrom Institute and something very big. Chris, bring us home, okay?
Meanwhile, back in on the Titan, Jack is dying, but he has a vision, and he hears a voice saying, "Connect all the branches," and he sees a door, and then he passes out, and it's Seven finds him on time, takes him to the infirmary, and at this point, Picard is called saying, "You've got to come down here," and it's reminiscent to the start of the episode where Riker tells Picard, "Well, it's a difficult delivery for Diana, and we won the Titan, and I got this call saying you got to come down here, sir," and it sounded serious, and he said it was the longest 16 seconds of my life, the turbo lift ride, and so that's an homage to that scene and the title of the episode. So Picard takes the 16-second turbo ride to the infirmary, and looks like Jack is slipping. He's inhaled too much deuterium gas. They're trying to restart his heart, and it looks like he's not going to make it. And of course, a great Star Trek fashion. Picard is there, Crusher's there. They both exchange worried looks, and you see all these emotions running through Picard's face of like, I now find a son only to lose him, and he feels that pain. But Jack manages to come back, and not only does he manage to come back, he manages to warn them that the face of the guy. There was a guy who attacked him inside the chamber. When he hit him, his face shifted, and everyone knows what that means. That he's a changeling. And meanwhile, warp has been repaired, warp capability, and Riker is ready to try again to just get out of there. And he's thinking, okay, the leak has been plugged. This time they won't be able to follow us and activate their weapon. But meanwhile, we see an image of the lieutenant who we know is a changeling, that he is walking towards an outlet where coolant is circles to the warp core, and he plants what is clearly a bomb. And just as Riker is about to order LaForge to let's warp out of here, the coolant section blows up, and that means no coolant to the warp core. The warp core can't operate, so they're stuck in the water. And the Shriek might not be able to follow them, but they can't get out of there. And so Picard manages to win over Riker, and he says, "Listen, we've got attack. They think we're at this point right here. Let's circle around and catch them by surprise." And Riker at that point thinks he's out of options. He's like, "Okay, yeah, let's do this." And so they turn around, and this is the first sign of no, this is a bad idea. The Shriek actually is holding position. So when they were supposed to come up behind them, the Shriek just stayed there. So they're facing one another, and Riker, against his better judgment, says, "Okay, you know what? Fire everything we've got." And they do. It's just a last gambit attack, and it backfires spectacularly because they activate the weapon, but this time not to move the ship or themselves, but to move the photon torpedoes that have been fired at them. And so the photon torpedoes move from heading towards them to the back of the Titan, and the Titan takes it. All of the photon torpedoes. It's a huge barrage. Their engines get knocked out. Sidney LaForge says that the ship is not responsive, and you see the ship is now being pulled deep into the gravity hole of what may or may not be a nebula, because the science officers detected that there's biological energy there as well as regular energy. And so the ship is sinking. Everyone looks like they're going to die. It's like a submarine when it's been hit and it's going down even further. And you see this range of emotion now on Riker's face, because he loves Picard, but he knows that he got he got convinced into doing something he didn't want to do, and it's going to have terrible effects for everyone on the ship. And so he just musters say, "Remove yourself from the bridge, Admiral. You've just killed us all." And Picard also realizes, oh, this is a huge mistake. And so he walks off the bridge, and everyone else on the bridge is just looking at Riker like, oh my God, did he just say we're going to die? And scene.
Yep. So that was a hell of an episode. I mean, it was probably, I think, well, I mean, I don't want to say this is the best one because we're only into the third episode of the season, but we just had a whole lot of stuff hit us.
It's the best of the ones we've seen so far.
It definitely is. Yeah. I mean, there was so much going on there. Um, you had, of course, the fantastic acting performance between Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden, just showing that amazing chemistry that they had for 6 of the 7 years of Next Generation. Um, just how incredible they were together um, in that scene. And then, of course, this episode was also directed by Jonathan Frakes himself. So you knew it was going to be good because he's probably responsible for many of the best episodes of Star Trek since the Next Generation onward, as well as two of the movies. So, you know, I think kudos to him for doing such a great job on this week's episode, and just keeping the standard as high as we've gotten so used to him doing since I guess the first episode he directed was sometime in I know it was season 3. It was the episode about Data's daughter. So okay, so I think this is where we should move into the good, the bad, and the Gorn, and some of everything we liked. So Chris, what did you think was best about this episode?
I liked a lot of things. I want to call out the superb tour de force of Jonathan Frakes, not only as directing but in his acting. I thought it was an incredible one-two punch. I think this is Jonathan Frakes' finest hour, both directing and, as I said, in acting at the same time.
Yeah,
Best episode we've seen so far of the season. I think I might go as far as saying best episode of the entire series of Picard so far.
yeah.
I mean, it was just everything was on point, fantastic. And as you also mentioned, I think Worf. I mean, and it's not, it's just what Michael Dorn brings to the role. Like the mention of Rafi or Rafaela, as he calls her, saying, like, what are you dressed for? It's like, and he says, this is casual. And says, what is it casual for beheadings on Tuesday? And then afterwards he like says, no, beheadings on Wednesday. Or when Rafaela talks, they have Thomas Decker's character there, and she says, "You know what? How far a Klingon can stick a sword up a?" And he interrupts and says, "Like, I don't do that anymore." So it's just these casual warfisms that just he owns the character. It really works, and it really appeals also to the fan base. But you know that is Worf down to like his introduction. I am Worf, son of Morg, House Martok, son of you know um,
Sergey.
son of Sergei, House Roshenko, Bane of the Duras family, like Slayer of Garon. It's like anyone else, you might be like, yeah, but no, the way he delivers the lines. I mean, this is the Worf that we want, and I am glad that the big reveal is left to Worf and Rafaela. That oh my God, it's the changelings. I mean, who saw that coming? Like none of us. So
No.
there were talks about there's going to be Deep Space Nine connection, and I was still kind of hoping in the back of my mind maybe we'll finally go back to Deep Space Nine. No, it's the changelings, and brilliant. And I have a couple other things, but I want to hear like what you thought about the
Okay.
good of the episode.
Well, in general, my favorite part, of course, is Worf. I just love the whole chemistry he has with Rafaela. Um, and of course, him basically doing what he does best, and that's kicking butt, taking name. Uh, but he's still, the warrior at heart, but he's grown older and wiser. And he, like with Picard and everybody else, as Jack says, is anybody truly who you remember them to be? Well, no, Worf has definitely gotten older and wiser. And I mean, he's had a long road. I mean, from being a survivor of the Romulan massacre at Kittimer to being raised on Earth, being the first Klingon to join Starfleet, and becoming a war hero ultimately in the Dominion War. Um, he's had a very long, distinguished career, and he has grown wiser for it. He is, he's definitely followed in the line of a lot of Klingons that okay, they might have been young and brash once, but now they've gotten older, and it's like yeah, I'm kind of learning from them. Some of the things I did when I was younger, but I think that was good. I love the revelation about the changelings. Like you, I did not see that coming. But it does give us an opportunity here, because I complained for years that I would have liked to have seen a next generation movie where they had to fight the Dominion, because I was like, okay, where the hell is the Enterprise during the Dominion War? It should be on the front lines because it's the most powerful ship, and Picard is its best captain. So, it would have been nice. We never got to really see that. So it'd be nice to finally see Picard take on the Dominion, or at least a faction of the Dominion. So it'll be interesting. Um, I liked. I thought the whole thing with Captain Shaw was really interesting, and there's something I'm going to get into in the GORN and then the predictions about what happened there. Um, I thought it was very interesting that Jack didn't. Beverly said that whole thing about Jack never wanted to meet Picard for some reason, which I think is odd. Even if he didn't really, at least just meet him one time just to satisfy his curiosity. So clearly he has some angst there. And I think, going back to chemistry again, having Jonathan Frakes and Patrick Stewart, they're amazing chemistry together. And the scenes with them on the bridge, then there's kind of a conflict there that, okay, Picard wants to attack, because there's an opportunity here to disable them. And I think Riker takes it a little bit too late. But of course, at that point, they don't really know about the changeling saboteur on board the ship. None of them do. Um, and I'll just wrap up the last thing I liked with, Worf making a reference. And it's clearly he's talking about Odo. He doesn't say Odo, but you get the impression when he says a friend warned him about this faction of changelings. Okay, who else is going to know? And who else, he only has one changeling friend, and that would be Odo. So, okay, that's another prediction I'm going to get into. But now, Chris, what do you think didn't work so well in this episode?
Well, before I get to that, I just wanted to finish up on some stuff that I did like, which is again a shout out to the brilliant acting between Beverly and Picard. It was just such a tour de force between Gates McFadden and Patrick Stewart of raw emotion and guilt and everything that's been built up. This balloon of what happened of 20 years. I had a son and it's just lit out. And, you see a little bit of a reference there with why we had a season 2 when he says, and now I know I wouldn't have been like my father, but maybe I could have learned that lesson 20 years earlier. Or just the sheer, it's like a heavyweight battle, like one haymaker's thrown and another haymaker's thrown. Beverly saying stuff like, I knew I could protect my son, but I wasn't sure if I could protect Jean-Luc Picard's son. I mean, it was just, the episode is worth watching alone just for those 4-minute exchange dialogue. It was really, really incredible. I also like the fact that it seems the show is bringing on some people we've seen from other shows. Like I talked about how we had Aaron Stanford from 12 Monkeys playing the Ferengi last week. And now we have Thomas Dekker, who many of you might remember from the Sarah Connor Chronicles, excuse me. So I'm enjoying to see who might they be bringing back in the next episode. So I like that they're bringing people, from other shows that we've enjoyed, even if it's just for brief appearances. But I like this a lot. And again, I want to say that the little nods here, I'm really enjoying Seven having a little tiny lack of a better term, diecast Voyager on her shelf. And I just like the scene in the episode where Sidney LaForge comes to her while she's still there because he gets a reprieve from being on the bridge by Shaw, and she says, "Listen, Shaw might not appreciate your loyalty to your friends, but my dad would." And she talks about how everyone thought I had to be an engineer because my dad's one of the greatest engineers, but I wanted to be a pilot, and everyone thought I got to be a pilot not because of my skills, but because I'm the daughter of Geordie LaForge, and who can say no to Geordie LaForge? And so they didn't think I belonged there, but I knew I belonged there, and you do too. And she cast aside this thank you, Commander Seven. And so those are the final things that I really enjoyed about the episode.
Yeah, I agree. That was a great scene too, and just shows the real skill of her, the acting skills and the chemistry that these actors and actresses bring to the show. Otherwise, I don't. You mentioned about having actors that appeared in other science fiction dramas. Um, I mean, the reason that I think a lot of these people had those shows in the first was obviously was Star Trek. It was because Star Trek was such a great viable science fiction drama that it did inspire entire generations that followed it with first Star Trek, and then of course Star Wars, Terminator, Aliens, all the other franchises, and there's a direct correlation there. So it's nice to see these other sci-fi actors coming back. I didn't really think too much bad didn't work. I think overall, um, I think that I think it was overall very well done. I had no complaints. I think that the writing was very solid. I think everything came together very nicely. Um, I think that obviously it's kind of bad planning that maybe Picard's plan would have worked if they'd done it sooner. But at the same time, I think given the fact that the Shrink has this weapon that can create these portholes at whims. Um, which is incredibly advanced technology that obviously um they didn't really account for that. So Chris, have you got anything?
It's a theme I want to harp upon throughout the rest of our season, but why didn't they give us this before? What the heck, people? I mean, this has been brilliant writing. This has been an excellent three episodes so far this season. Why did you give us season two? I mean, did you give us season two just for that brief moment in which Picard tells Beverly, "Well, I would not have been like my dad"? This is brilliant stuff. I'm
Yeah,
okay with season one. This what we're seeing right now should have been season two. So
yeah.
that's my bad that you had this and you didn't give this to us sooner. Like what the heck? This is what we wanted. So that's a theme I'm gonna harp on for all season.
Yeah, I'm gonna say one thing. Um not so much bad. I'm just gonna throw this out here, but it's just a thought. They definitely seem to be going back over a lot of the tropes that came up in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Like, okay, we're fighting in a nebula. Picard having this strained relationship with his son. The whole idea that, oh, okay, this generation is getting older. It's good. It works. We don't need to keep borrowing back from everything though that was done in previous Treks. Though I mean, next generation is strong enough that it could stand on its own. Um, but it's good for what they're doing, but at the same time, don't keep borrowing from stuff from you know. Okay, I saw them do it in Wrath of Khan, but that's just nitpicking, I think, on my part. But I thought I'd call that out. Um, that
I think I'm gonna echo um, what Space Force has just dropped in the comment lines for us. Thank you very
yeah.
much for watching the show. That
Thank you, Space Force.
yes, definitely take this over Disco and the rest. I mean, this is just this is the good stuff. Other nitpicks I have about it is you know, shouldn't there be some consequence to the energy reserves of the Shriek when they use the weapon? I mean, shouldn't they have some type of like recharge? I mean, if you go back to the original Star Trek, when the Romulans have their device that they use to destroy the outposts near the neutral zone, I mean, they have to decloak to be able to fire it, and they just
Yeah.
can't fire it in succession because, you know, the laws of physics dictate that if you have a huge energy expenditure, you have to have you have to have some type of recharge, and they just use that weapon at will. And I'm like, I don't think it's the same like a photon torpedo that you have like 20 photon torpedoes and you just can keep on firing them. I mean, I think maybe at least later on there should be some type of consequence spotted that, okay, if you use this weapon, this is what happens. Like your shield energy drops, or like you can't use your phasers or launch photon torpedoes for like maybe a minute at a time. But it just seems to me, if you expending that large of an amount of energy to use the weapon, there's got to be some consequences to the Shriek ship itself, and we haven't seen that yet. So I'm just kind of like, Yeah, this isn't just like, keep on firing proton torpedoes. I think there needs to be some type of like consequence for the shriek itself that I'm hoping we see later on. Um, then the other minor nitpick, and this might be because Picard is on the bridge, but if you need your best crew at the moment on the bridge to handle this crisis, wouldn't you say get 7 of 9 or Commander Hansen like up here right now? Because you have a huge asset who knows the ship. Wouldn't you call for her to like, I know she was like, this happened to the previous captain. I'm the captain now. Get her back up here.
Yeah, that's something, I I didn't buy. Yeah, I think that you would have thought Riker would have like told Seven to come back up here because I need you up here rather than sitting in your quarters. So, I mean, obviously they're if they all survive it, they're all getting in trouble. So might as well, have her coming back up. And um yeah, I thought that was kind of a weird thing to do, but I guess for the sake of the writing, they figured they need somebody to go with Jack, and so Seven was the most likely candidate. So, um, but I think now, yeah, I think her part is going to continue to grow throughout this, but I think that hopefully in the next episode she'll be back up on the bridge. Um, there are any rate, so I don't really have anything else to really, anything else really to complain about. But well, I didn't really have a complaint anyway. I just started saying, okay, don't keep relying going back to stuff they did on Wrath of Khan, because I think that was something that sort of hurt them on season 2 when it felt like they kept going back to Voyage Home for
Yeah.
tropes, and
So,
was,
so Josh, when,
yeah,
when the Thomas Dekker character is in cuffs, I mean, like, so when he can't hold his form any longer, he melts away. The
yeah.
one thing I was unclear of was the cuffs nullifying his ability to like, shift form, or is it that he just, against all costs, did not want to reveal himself until he had to because, um, he oozes out of the cuffs when he can't hold his form anymore.
Um, he was trying to hold his form. He was trying not
Okay,
to reveal that he
all right,
was a changeling. He was
okay,
trying to keep that under wraps. Um, Maybe trying to figure out another way to escape, but
got it.
um, yeah, it was definitely getting harder for him to hold his shape. Um, and because changelings can only hold a shape for only a very limited amount of time. And as you remember with Odo, remember the episode where Odo was trapped in the turbolift with Loxana on Deep Space Nine,
Right.
and he was trying not to lose his shape because he didn't want to do that in front of her. And she told him it's okay. I don't mind. I will keep your secret. And then he felt secure enough into going back into liquid form. But at this point, obviously he couldn't keep it. The change couldn't keep his form. He held it as long as he could, but at that point, Worf had figured out what he was.
And I guess
Uh,
in liquid form, they're the most vulnerable. Okay, I'm buying this.
yeah. Well, I mean, technically, has Odo explained it? Even changelings need a rest period when they could just be liquid, when they could revert to their natural state. So like I think it was something like every 16 hours or so they had to revert back. They couldn't keep holding shapes. And sometimes for Odo, at least, shape shifting into numerous different forms could be very taxing for him. Um, so I'm guessing that this guy had to shapeshift back, and he couldn't hold his form, and he knew the jig was up. So of course, Worf disintegrates him. And I did notice, by the way, that Worf was using a TNG show era phaser,
Yes,
not one of these what I call the nail gun phasers, which I don't like very much. But
agreed.
yeah, not a good design. And yeah, he was definitely, yeah, he couldn't hold it any longer. Another thing I want to bring up in passing, and this is going to go into one of my predictions. Changelings are hard to detect with sensors. Okay, they can become inanimate objects, and you can run a tricorder over it, and you just see if they turn into a cup, you just read a cup. Okay, it isn't until you do something like either the blood test thing that they did on Deep Space Nine, which isn't always accurate because, as Cisco's dad pointed out in an episode, couldn't a changeling just take somebody, absorb their blood, and just let it out as they needed to? But the only sure way is to fire a low level phaser beam, or what they call a phaser sweep, and cause the changeling in question to cause them pain and force them to change shape. That's been the only way we've been 100% certain with that. So this is going to play into one of my predictions here, but that was probably one reason why they could not detect that this guy was a changeling, because they can fool sensors. But so before I make my prediction, Chris, do you want to make some predictions?
Oh, are we skipping the Gorn?
Oh no, we're still in the Gorn. Okay, we're doing the
Okay.
Gorn. Yeah. Okay.
So my Gorn is so. What is Vatic a changeling? That's one question I have looking at the Gorn moving forward. Now that we know this linked, and what were those branches and the door that Jack saw? Um, so I mean, interesting. It seems to hint Jack might be something more, but like it's just and the voiceover, like, is that somehow related to what the science officer says that what they're in might actually not be specifically a nebula, but some type of biological entity itself? So, you know, what is at the bottom of this nebula? Is it communicating with Jack somehow? And these are questions I have moving forward, as well as, like, is might Vatic be a changeling?
I think it's possible Vatic is some sort of changeling, or is a changeling, and definitely seems to be quite a crazy one too. Uh, it remain. I don't know. It's interesting what is going on here, but I think obviously the Shrek is not a common vessel. This going back to what you were saying about, is there something you know what exactly, how exactly are they using this portal weapon? Is it causing a drain on their systems? All these other things. What is going on with this ship? And how are they able to keep using it so randomly, as easily as they would use phasers or torpedoes? It's definitely doing something here. So where is it drawing its power from? How does this thing work? I mean, are they going to answer that? I hope they will, because that's kind of an important question. Usually, Star Trek is very good about answering these hard science things. So we'll see. Um, and I am curious. I want to know what is this thing at the bottom of the well? You know, what could it be? Could it be? I don't know. Could it be? It could be anything. But of course, we also need to know what is the other thing that they got out of the Daystrom Institute.
3D. That is for my predictions as well.
Yes. Okay. So moving on into theories, Chris, you want to go ahead and hit us with your theory?
My theory is that what would be the one thing more lethal than this portal weaponry? It would be the knowledge of how to use it effectively. And where would you get the knowledge? The knowledge would be from an evil AI. Because as we've seen through Lower Decks, what is the one thing that they keep stored at Daystrom? It's all the evil AIs. So I think the thing that was taken was a very evil AI that has the capability of enhancing that portal tech, teaching them how to use it, giving them strategy. I think it was. We'll find out it's an evil AI.
And I think that based on the fact that I wish they had not shown this in the trailers.
Hmm.
I think we know who it is.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that Marvel does so well with its movies, that they don't tip their hand like for the big reveals. I mean, they
Mhm.
show you just enough in the trailers that you think you know enough, but then they still have that sleight of hand, that look here so you don't look here, and they just has a surprise. So yeah, from the trailers I think we might know who it is. I wish they hadn't done that as well, but I think that would be a logical explanation of how that thing we're talking about managed to show up in the trailers.
Now I'm going to hit you with my prediction.
Hit me.
Okay. Wait for it.
Okay.
Shaw is Odo.
Mm,
Go
maybe.
with me. Go with me for a
Okay,
second. Go
I'm
with me.
staying with you here. I'm
Go
staying
with
with
me.
you.
All right. All right. Let's notice how Shaw acts. He has this very gruff attitude. He seems to do a lot to keep people away. You just think it's just because he's mental or something, but what if he's hiding something and he doesn't let anybody get too close because they might figure out who he is? Also, in the scene where he communicates to Jack, where he grabs Jack, he says, "How are they following us?" In other words, you need to figure this out. He's seen a clue. And also, you notice like the blood splatter trail. He's leaking a lot of blood. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's blood. It could be changeling matter, or it could be like I said before, that maybe he absorbed some blood from somewhere else and he's leaking it. And this was a good excuse to try to get somebody to track that. That he knew there was another changeling aboard the Titan. He just had, but he needed someone to go find it for him. And the whole thing about suddenly he's is having some sort of infection or something that they can't figure. And of course, like I said, with changelings, you can't detect them until they change form, or unless you zap them with a phaser. So I think it's possible. I may be wrong here, but it would be a rather interesting twist if Shaw reveals he's Odo, that he's been Odo all this time.
I'm gonna semi buy this and wait. So let's say I'm putting a hold on this to like see if I'm gonna buy or not. It's
Mhm.
possible. I'm gonna give you this. It's possible. Um, Another theory I have is that when even though the ship is not able to warp out of the nebula, but I think in that brief moment that they are outside and that Riker has said, like, send a distress signal. Um, I think the signal does get out, and I think that's what's going to bring Geordi into the show, because I think there's all these hints about family, what you would do for your sons or daughters, like you'd burn like the world for them. I think the SOS does get out. I think as soon as Geordi hears it, Geordi gets on the ship and it's going to go come looking for them. So if somehow, some way they do manage to get out of the nebula, I think it's going to be they're going to find Geordi, and Geordi's going to be the one to tow them back. But that's how I think you bring Geordi into the show. That the SOS goes out, it effectively go out. Starfleet gets it. He hears about it. He's like, "My daughter's there. Holy shit! I'm dropping everything, and I'm hopping on my own ship, and I'm going out there."
And also, I have one other theory. I don't remember if I pitched this last week. It's something I've talked about with people privately. I'm still hoping they do this. Is that, and going back to Geordi for a second, I think at some point they're going to need a different ship other than the Titan to finish this. And it turns out the one ship they got available is a recently decommissioned Galaxy class ship, which they will rename Enterprise, and take it in one last flight to save the Federation. So
You
I'm hoping for that.
I'm semi buying that as well. I think you're right. I don't think it's going to be the Galaxy class. I think it's going to be Sovereign class, recently decommissioned. So I am again. I'm putting a hold on that because I think you're right, but I don't think it's going to be the Galaxy class. I think it's going to be the Sovereign class. But I think you're right there. And I'm going to hold firm on my prediction that Jordy has rebuilt something because of his close proximity to his old friend. And I think if you're facing an evil AI that is like just brilliant, what would you need to do to counter that? Well, you need to activate something that is equally as brilliant. So I think I'm holding steady in my prediction of last week of like Jordy has rebuilt something that maybe he should not have.
Well, we're gonna see. I mean, I'm chomping at the bit for the next episode. But before we wrap this up, I
Mhm.
want to address something Space Force wrote. Did they want to get new fans and didn't want to spend any money with seasons 1 and 2? Don't know how to answer that. I think that honestly, that maybe just the writing kind of fell down at the end of season 1, and then um season 2 things kind of just went all over the place. I think so far this season's had more of its stuff together, Space Force. But thank you for asking your questions.
Indeed, thank you.
Before we go, we want to mention next weekend, the Annapolis Comic Con is happening. And Chris, do you remember where it's going to be held?
Um, I'm assuming I someplace in Annapolis. I don't know the venue.
Okay. Well, just a heads up, everybody. If you are a comic book fan, please do make your way over to the Annapolis Comic Book Convention next weekend. And, if anybody wants to tell us how it was, or if anybody's going, that'd be great. Um, Chris, where can everybody find you?
Well, I also just want to give people a heads up that on the 24th to the 26th in Richmond, Virginia, we're also going to have a GalaxyCon,
Yes.
which will have Riker and Crusher, aka Gates McFadden, and Jonathan Frakes. So if you like what you're seeing so far, you can head on down to GalaxyCon Richmond to listen to the stars themselves talk about how the show is moving forward. So we have immediately next week at Annapolis Comic Con, and then on the 24th and 25th, we have GalaxyCon in Richmond. And so, in the meanwhile, where can people find me? They can find me on Instagram, Verde Cosplay. If you are a cosplayer and you have been showing off how good your work is in the DC area, odds are you might be on my Instagram feed. Come take a look.
Yes. And I am still at Facebook under Josh Pritchett Jr. And my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is still on sale on Amazon. There it is. There's the
There it is.
cover, done by my great friend Kay Wern. And it is still available on Amazon and Kindle if you'd like to read it. And I will be selling copies of it and hopefully some other work this coming shore leave in July. So, with that said, on behalf of everybody here at Movers and Shakers Unlimited, I am Josh Pritchett.
I'm Chris Pabon. I will not be here next weekend, but you all have fun. Peace and long life.
And I will be here next weekend with a guest host. Take care, everybody. Kapla!